Now, going back to new construction and the challenges that you face with that, and how do you create an atmosphere in a room, in a place that doesn't dictate that atmosphere?
Well, this was screaming new construction in Connecticut. That was a add-on to a very, very old house. It had been one of the first bar restaurants, I think from like the late 1700s. And so there were these rooms that had amazing beams, but very low ceilings and fireplaces that went almost up to the ceiling. And then the rest of the house, it had been owned by an architect who had been adding onto it, and he was building on in a much more, it was beautifully done, but it's still next to this stuff that you could just feel the smoke in the walls. It felt a little Pottery Barn. And when I was brought in to add on more, like the next wing, the buyers of the house, who were my clients, employed the original owner, who was the architect, who had done his renovation because he knew it so well and he loved it. But they approached it with me in tow, saying, you know, work with our designer because we want it to feel like the old house, not so much the schoolhousey Connecticut farmhouse style new house. So everything that went in under my supervision, because I have the fun of actually picking materials where the architect has the misery of really laying it out and making it all work, I got to fixate on the details. Like, okay, any glass has to be restoration glass. It has to have the warble and the wiggle in it. And instead of using a door, which would make sense, we're closing this library off, can we use just, you know, ridiculously small, what's the word? Not French doors, I guess French doors. Because we wanted to be able to see through to the window from the hallways. And I brought in a faux finisher so that nothing, even though we worked together and found this, you know, he built beautiful bookcases and we picked what I thought was the perfect stain color, it still needed to be whacked up just a little bit. And that isn't something that can happen very well at the millworkers. It needs to happen once the bookcases have been installed. And if somebody were to be walking by these bookcases for 50 years bumping into them, they'd bump into them on certain corners. And we were able to sort of, you know, bang into them, and she knocked it and chiseled it and made things look old, and took the ceiling. And, you know, we wanted it to look like it had been aged and sort of smoked in and dirty over time. And all the layers that were put in the material selection process made it feel pretty effectively old. I was really happy with how that part came out.
So it blends organically with the rest of the residents. Now this looks like a very fun space to deal with, and kind of almost reminds me of some of our condominiums here in Las Vegas with the floor-to-ceiling windows, smaller spaces, a lot of mirrored elements. How do you go in and tackle a room like this? For example, what is the square footage of the room? Was it a smaller
it's small.
room?
I think this room is probably, I guess, about 12.5 feet wide by maybe 15 feet deep. And it was being used as a little TV room den. And they wanted it to be modern, but it had to be sort of modern with warmth and quirk. So we were mixing sort of Italian modern 1950s, some Parzinger pieces.
It's a very unique look. Did you incorporate any of the owner's existing furniture into this room at all?
I did. The sofa in the middle is, I think it's an old Baker sofa that used to be a 3-seater that was skirted, and we had a new base made for it.
So that was an existing
and put a single bench cushion, and it probably ended up costing the same amount as getting a new sofa, but the client was so happy to reuse something that it was kind of came out in the wash.
Especially right now, being that we're operating under so much psychology in the way that we spend our money, the way that we design, what are some of those psychological tricks that you use on your clients to kind of find a happy median between and to keep their business coming back and back and back?
Well, I think it's really listening to what they want. It was I think, a bone of contention between the husband and the wife. The husband was like, we have great stuff. We just spent a lot of money 5 years ago. And the wife was saying, I hate it all, I hate it all, I hate it all. I had no say in what he spent a lot of money on 5 years ago because I was just his girlfriend. Now we're married, we're moving into a new apartment, why do we have to do this? And the answer was just to tell them both, we can take both needs into consideration, and where it becomes financially wrong, I'm going to tell you. But it ended up being the same amount of money as buying a new sofa, but it made him so happy knowing it was the old one, and we were able to turn it into what the wife liked. So
you can put the title marriage counselor next to
a little bit
interior designer.
But it's really just it's listening to them and realizing that there are 20 solutions to any problem, and as a designer, it's our job to come up with the 3 that we believe will work for the space, that we know we can execute, and will make our clients happy, and then let them choose. And then you kind of work again back at the crossword puzzle to see how each of these decisions can work. And thank God for fabrics and being able to control the color scheme, because even if you have a lot of disparate pieces of furniture, if you have the luxury of layering over them something that pulls it all together in terms of color or form, you can make it work. And everybody has to have their victory. The husband, the wife, the space, the budget, each thing dictates something. And then as a designer, your clients know you're willing to acquiesce. It's about their need every time. And then the one time you have your tantrum and you say, I can't do it, you cannot put that in there. Or please, please trust me, take this risk. Do the fun coffee table. Everything else is looking cookie cutter to me. They'll really believe you because you stood by them, you went with everything they wanted, it is their room, and then they hired you because of your opinion. And if you're going to sit there and flap your wings and stamp your feet over something, they're going to say, okay, I get it. You're working on for me. So it's so funny seeing these things back to back.
Yeah, I mean, when you put together all of your work and you look and you're like, wow, do some of the pieces, when you look back at some of your stuff, do you say to yourself, wow, I would have done that differently, or I wish I would have done this, or
all the time.
Wish they would have listened to me about this?
I want to crawl in and restyle photos and change it, but it's,
What is one thing in this room? Did you have carte blanche to do whatever you wanted in this room, or was there one thing that a homeowner was particularly stuck on?
I never have carte blanche. But, you go as far as you can with it. I mean, if I were to critique this room now, all the fabrics in here, except for the 2 in the foreground and the stripe, are outdoor fabrics or sunbrella fabrics, because this is in Florida and you're just going to get cooked. And we needed something that was a solution dyed material that wasn't going to turn pale gray, blue, or purple after the first 2 years sitting in the windows. But if I were to go back and critique this, I would change the light fixtures on the wall. It looks sort of dead and anemic to me. And I would make the rug, which I don't even remember where that came from. I think the client picked it out, and I think it works, the little throw rug. But I would make it much bigger. I find anytime you take a small rug and put it in a room, you're just creating a smaller and smaller center. So everything else, excuse me, I'm so sniffly, everything else feels sort of peripheral. I would probably add in some plants because this room needs some trees over in the corners, something alive, but this was a rarely used weekend home. And I'm always looking at things. I'd love to see a fun little end table, which we did have some cute ceramic end table, but I can't help it. I look at anything, any picture, and it's a compulsion. I think that's why I do what I do.
Constantly getting to reinvent.